Hi guys, and welcome to the VGC strategy channel. Today we'll be covering a type of team most of you will probably have already heard of, and that's Perish Trap. Perish Trap teams can be a little tricky to play, both playing with them and against them. In this video, I'll be covering some of the basic mechanics, the usual suspects, how to play a Perish Trap team, and how to counter it. So, let's get started. To begin with, a Perish Trap team needs two things. First, one or more Pokemon with the move Perish Song, and secondly, one or more Pokemon with the ability Shadow Tag. Perish Song makes all Pokemon on the field faint in 3 turns, and Shadow Tag prevents your opponent from switching out. Perish Trap teams tend to be easy to spot in Team Preview, as they will usually have at least 2 of the following Pokemon on their team. Gengar, Gothitelle, and Gothorita are probably the best Pokemon in the current format with the Shadow Tag ability, which is why they are on most Perish Trap teams. Bear in mind though, that Shadow Tag does not affect Ghost-type Pokemon or other Pokemon with the ability Shadow Tag. While you could conceivably also use Arena Trap to prevent your opponents from switching out, this ability does not affect a lot of the Pokemon common in the format. Additionally, Trapinch and Dugtrio are both extremely frail and will usually struggle to survive more than one hit. Gengar and Politoed both learned the move Perish Song, which is why they are so common on Perish Trap teams. While quite a few other Pokemon also learn this move, these are the most widespread because of other things they can do for the team, but more on that later. Aside from Perish Song and Shadow Tag users, the remainder of a Perish Trap team is generally focused on supporting these Pokemon in fulfilling their role. There are a few options for support Pokemon. One of them is Fake Out support. This allows the Perish Song user to use Perish Song on the first turn, while the support uses Fake Out on the most threatening Pokemon on the opposing team. In this situation, the Perish Song user is usually Gengar, as it is the only Pokemon to have access to both Perish Song and the Shadow Tag ability. You certainly don't want your opponent switching out after you just used Perish Song. The 3 main Fake Out users commonly found in the Perish Trap team would be Liepard, Raichu, or Scrafty. Liepard and Raichu are quite similar in that they also both learn the move Encore, which can be deadly when used in combination with Disable from Gengar. This can lock an opponent into using Struggle without being able to switch out. This can be crucial for keeping Gengar alive in the turns following Perish Song. Scrafty functions a bit differently in that it aims to keep Gengar alive by providing Intimidate support, and being bulky enough by itself so that it doesn't get KO'd easily. Redirection in the form of Amungus's Rage Powder or the move Mat Block from Greninja are 2 other ways in which your support can keep your Shadow Tag and Perish Song users from being targeted. Although a lot less common, some other options might include Azumarill and Marowak, which can keep super effective attacks away from Politoed with their Sap Sipper and Lightning Rod abilities. Both of these also learn the move Perish Song. Dewgong is another interesting yet rarely seen Pokemon, which learns both Fake Out and Perish Song. It is sometimes used in combination with Gothorita or Gothitelle to run a Trick Room version of Perish Trap. Now that we've covered the basics of a Perish Trap team and some of the Pokemon you might expect to see, let's take a closer look at some of the common leads you could choose with a Perish Trap team. The first lead we'll be going over is Greninja and Gengar. The idea here being is to Mega Evolve Gengar and use Perish Song while protecting it from any attacks with Mat Block from Greninja. Unless the opponent can outspeed Greninja's 191 speed, they will not be getting off any damaging attacks this turn, at least not without priority. And without a taunt that can outspeed Gengar, they will also struggle to prevent Gengar from using Perish Song. After this, you can stall a turn with Protect, and only need to keep the opposing team locked for 2 more turns before they faint. We will be looking at what to do after this double protect later on in the video. This lead is extremely effective when used successfully, but with the right Pokemon it can also be shut down very quickly. Therefore, if you do want to use it, it is important to know when this lead will work and when it will not. In order to do so, you need to be aware of which Pokemon can outspeed you, and also know the common taunt and Choice Scarf users. For example, a Choice Scarf Hydreigon will both outspeed Greninja and one-hit KO Gengar with a Dark Pulse. Or for example, Crobat is a common taunt user that can outspeed Gengar and prevent Perish Song from going up. Since you're putting all your eggs into one basket with Perish Trap, anticipating and preventing these situations is crucial. As soon as you enter the team preview screen, you should be scanning the other team for potential threats to your different leads and play accordingly. In case you're watching this video to learn how to counter a Perish Trap team, not how to play it, here are a few pointers which you may find helpful, against this lead in particular. The easiest way to shut it down is to just outspeed it, for example with a Choice Scarf. That way you can bypass the Mat Block and hit hard. If your team does not have that option though, you could use Fake Out, which is present on many teams. You could Fake Out the Greninja to prevent the Mat Block from triggering, and then target Gengar with your second Pokemon. This plan is fairly predictable though, so bear in mind your opponent could be expecting it. If that's the case, he or she could protect Gengar while switching out Greninja for an Encore user and lock you into Fake Out during the following turn. So, if your opponent does have Liepard, Raichu, or Whimsicott in the back, you might decide to double target the Greninja instead and try for a KO, as most Perish Traps are heavily reliant on switches and a Pokemon advantage in order to function effectively. The second lead we will be looking at is Raichu and Gengar. Raichu is one of the fastest Fake Out users in the game, and as mentioned previously, also has access to Encore. This means any protects by the opposing side could easily be Encored, turning the most common move in VGC into dead weight. A side effect of this is that it allows your Perish Trap team to play offensively if necessary, as Mega Gengar does have an impressive 190 special attack with a neutral nature and no EV investment. Raichu also has access to Volt Switch. This means you can switch out Gengar when it is in danger, and Volt Switch with Raichu to bring Gengar back into the other slot, within the same turn and thereby not breaking the Shadow Tag lock. This is particularly important if you need to maintain a lock on the opponents for Perish Song and have just used Protect on the previous turn. The Raichu Gengar combo also has the option to double Protect on the first turn, and then disable plus Encore one of the Pokemon on the following turn, effectively neutralizing it. Gengar and Raichu can then choose to continue playing 2 against 1 or set up a Perish Song. Finally, if there is only one threat on the field, this combination also has the option to Fake Out the biggest threat with Raichu and set up Perish Song with Gengar. The fact that this lead can be played in so many different ways makes it an extremely versatile lead. The main drawback of this lead is that Raichu is quite frail, and both Pokemon are very vulnerable to a well-timed Earthquake. When it comes to countering this lead, you will have to play around the Encores and Disables. One way to play around Disable is to keep switching moves with your Pokemon, so that they do not become useless on any given turn if the previously used move is disabled. Both Gengar and Raichu are relatively frail, so attacks do not necessarily have to be super effective to get the job done. To work around the Encore, avoid using moves that you do not want to be locked into, like Fake Out or Protect. Another thing to bear in mind is that the Shadow Tag only comes into effect once Gengar Mega evolves, so you can still switch on the first turn. You could also use this to your advantage by baiting a double Protect, for example by leading with a faster Fake Out user like Weavile. But instead of using Fake Out, which can be Encored, you pull a double switch instead, and your opponent are sitting ducks on the second turn because they just protected. Pulling a double switch also prevents Raichu and Gengar from using Disable or Encore on any of your moves on the second turn. This means that you can bring in a Ghost type or something with Volt Switch or U-turn, and they cannot lock it down. This will throw off the timing for Perish Song and can be very irritating for a Perish Trap team to deal with. The third lead I'll be covering is Gengar and Scrafty, which was popularized by the Japanese player YT last year. You can find the link to his blog in the description below. This lead is somewhat similar to the Raichu and Gengar lead in that it uses Fake Out support, although it doesn't have as many alternatives like Encore or Volt Switch. To balance this out, however, Scrafty is a lot bulkier than Raichu, and the Intimidate support also helps keep Gengar alive longer. The plan of action here is to Fake Out the biggest threat with Scrafty and use Perish Song on Gengar as he Mega evolves. Gengar and Scrafty both protect the next turn, followed by a switch into a different Shadow Tag user like Gothorita or Gothitelle to soak up any incoming attacks while keeping the opponent locked with Shadow Tag. This is one of the better Perish Trap leads, but it is also one of the more straightforward ones, which makes it easier to counter when you know how to play around it. Fake Out support can be very beneficial here, as it can shut down Scrafty for a turn and let your other Pokemon focus on Gengar. Getting an early KO against the Perish Trap team is huge, even if Gengar does manage to get Perish Song off, as it will mess with the timing and the switches of the Perish Trap team. Alternatively, you could try to just taunt the Gengar. Even if you cannot do it before Gengar uses Perish Song, not being able to protect or substitute the following turns is likely to help you a lot. But sometimes you just don't really have the team to check it on the first turn. Since the double protect is expected on the second turn, you could use that time for a boosting move, like Swords Dance, to secure some KOs on the next turn. Especially on a slow team, turning the battle into a 2-on-2 could be enough to secure a victory against the Perish Trap team. U-turn and Volt Switch really mess with the timing of this lead, and is therefore one of its best counters. The fourth and final lead I'll be covering is perhaps one you might not have expected, Kangaskhan and Gengar. It was also recommended to me by the same Japanese player mentioned earlier, so I decided to include it in this video. Since these two Pokemon are both relatively popular, they might not trigger any Perish Trap red flags for your opponent in Team Preview. Yet despite their appearances, the basic idea is once again to use Perish Song with Gengar and Fake Out with Kangaskhan on the first turn. Regular Kangaskhan is still pretty fast and bulky. It also has the advantage of not flinching due to its inner focus ability, which can catch some of the faster Fake Out users off guard if they do try to flinch it. Kangaskhan also brings an extremely helpful support move to the table in the form of Disable, which can be a complete game changer if your opponent is not expecting it. This could allow you to get a free switch or maybe even a substitute with Gengar, if necessary. The biggest danger of this lead is not knowing about it when you're facing it, so if you're trying to counter it, Forewarned is forearmed. Since you know Gengar is going to use Perish Song on the first turn, an unexpected super effective move onto Gengar could easily seal up the game for you. Countering this lead is very similar to the Scraftian Gengar lead, except that you cannot Fake Out the Kangaskhan and need to be aware that you might be targeted with a Disable later on. Again, your priority should be to either prevent Perish Song from going up, trying to score an early KO, or using Ghost types and moves like U-Turn and Volt Switch. If you're feeling particularly paranoid about any of these matchups, you can always run Roar on one of your Pokémon, which in this generation not only ignores accuracy and evasion, but also moves like Detect, Protect, and Spiky Shield. Since Perish Trap teams have to stall turns with Protect, having Roar on one of your Pokémon is pretty much a strong counter to any Perish Trap team. Now that we've been through some of the leads for Perish Trap teams, let's have a look at what tends to happen during the mid-game. Regardless of which route you choose with your Perish Trap team, chances are you will end up protecting your Shadow Tag user at some point, and now you need to switch out while maintaining the Shadow Tag lock on the opposing two Pokémon. The simplest way to do this is just to switch out your Shadow Tag user and bring in a different one, like Gothorita, Gothitelle, or even the less popular Wobbuffet. Fortunately, all of these are quite bulky, so they won't go down to just any hit. Although I wouldn't recommend Wobbuffet unless you have a good reason for it, because it doesn't learn Protect. While you're switching out your Shadow Tag user, a double switch is often best, as it lets both of your Pokémon protect safely to stall out the final turn of the Perish Song. The second Pokémon you switch in is usually also a bulky support that learns Perish Song, such as Altaria, Azumarill, Dewgong, Lapras, or Politoed. If you only have one Shadow Tag user on your team, things get slightly more complicated, but there are a couple of tricks you can use to keep the opponents locked in and your Shadow Tag user alive. First, you could switch in something with an eject button, like an Amoonguss, which once targeted, switches out and lets you switch your Shadow Tag user back in. In the case of Gengar, this is great because it allows you to get back on the field safely without taking any damage and without the Perish Song counter, so you are able to protect to stall out the final turn of Perish Song. Eject button also cancels the effect of opposing Volt Switch and U-Turn users, which is a good thing to know if you expect your opponent to switch out via that route. Besides the eject button, another option is simply to switch out your Shadow Tag user while using Volt Switch or U-Turn with your support Pokémon, which lets you bring your Shadow Tag user back into the other slot. Of course, you can always redirect opposing attacks with moves like Rage Powder, or just shut them down altogether with Encore and Disable. Once you feel that you will be able to execute the Perish Trap strategy successfully for the first two opposing Pokémon, you should start thinking about how you will handle the next two. As soon as the next two come in, ideally you will have one Perish Song user and one support Pokémon on the field. Assuming you are at a 4-2 advantage at this stage, as long as you manage to use Perish Song once more, you're likely to be able to stall out the remaining 3 turns with Protects and Switches and secure a win. If you're trying to counter a Perish Trap team, the mid-game is likely the last chance you will have to turn the game around if you haven't already done so. At this stage, you will simply have to predict the Perish Trap team's move correctly and secure some kills before you are at too big a disadvantage. The good news is that you will likely have at least 2 free hits with your Pokémon for 1 turn, so make them count. Now that we've covered most of the theory, let's check out a battle I recorded earlier with a Perish Trap team. As you'll see on the top right, I'm using a Perish Trap team with an optional rain mode. My opponent is Admin Tabitha, with quite an interesting team herself. I would like to lead with the rain mode here, but the potential Focus Sash on Smeargle is worrying me, because I might have to double target it in order to prevent a Dark Void from going off. If the Landorus is Scarfed though, Perish Trap could end up being a disaster, as Mega Gengar will not take an Earthquake very well. However, I'm not expecting her to bring the Landorus, as the rain mode would shut it down very quickly. If she does bring it, I'll have to sneak in my Air Balloon Greninja somehow and KO the Landorus with Ice Beam. I don't want to lead with Greninja though, since it will not do very well against Fake Out from Kangaskhan or the Dark Void from Smeargle, so I choose Gengar and Whimsicott as my lead instead. Fortunately, my opponent doesn't end up bringing the Landorus and instead sends out Kangaskhan and Smeargle. I'm going to double Protect on the first turn, just in case she decides to use a Fake Out, which I get Encore. It also gives me the option to disable any incoming Dark Void on the second turn without being put to sleep by it on the first turn. The opponent ends up making the safe play though, and uses Return on Kangaskhan while using Dark Void with Smeargle. On the second turn, I can now safely disable the Dark Void with Gengar, as it can no longer be targeted by Kangaskhan, which just Mega Evolved. This means I have to delay using the Perish Song, but that certainly can wait for the moment, because if my entire team is put to sleep, I have no chance. Unfortunately, Kangaskhan can now also easily KO my Whimsicott, even through the Focus Sash, which is something I'd like to avoid because an early KO will put me behind quite a lot. I have Greninja and Amoonguss in the back, and since Amoonguss can probably take a return and recover with Regenerator, I decide to switch him in. The turn plays out as expected, allowing me to switch in Greninja at the end of it. Being able to bring in Greninja here safely puts me in a good position, as it allows Gengar to finally use Perish Song while not being worried about any Dark Voids or any attacks because Greninja can use Mat Block. My opponent does make a good move here by using Sucker Punch. While it's not going to hit, it does prevent the return from being disabled on the following turn. She makes another unexpected move with Smeargle and uses Spore. On the turn after that, the Protect on Gengar is obvious, as I don't want to take any damage and I also don't want to be put to sleep. I decide to let the Gengar KO the Greninja, as it is dead weight anyway, now that it is asleep. If my opponent had not used Sucker Punch on the previous turn, I might have been able to avoid this KO by disabling the return now, so her good play certainly paid off. Once Kangaskhan kills the Greninja, I decide to bring in Amoonguss. I bring in Amoonguss because it's immune to Spore and can redirect it away from Gengar with Rage Powder. Another return here, however, will probably kill the Amoonguss, so I need to make sure I disable that with Gengar before that happens. The turn ends up playing out as expected, and I just need to protect with Amoonguss one more turn and switch out the Gengar before it dies to Perish Song. Since the disable has worn off now though, I can't afford to Rage Powder with Amoonguss since it might fall asleep with Dark Void. My opponent has another ace up her sleeve though, and ends up using Sheer Cold on the Whimsicott which I just switched in. Fortunately, it ends up missing, although the Focus Sash would have allowed it to survive if it had connected. At this point, I have a nice lead, and end up closing out the game with regular attacks, since Thundurus decided to start taunting my entire team. To finish up the video, I've made a quick summary of the counters to Perish Trap teams in general. That way you'll know what to play around when using a Perish Trap team, as well as what you need to do when you're facing one. First, you can try to play around the Shadow Tag lock by bringing Ghost-type Pokemon, something with Shadow Tag, or even a Pokemon that can use Skill Swap on the Shadow Tag. Failing that, U-Turn and Volt Switch are two good moves to keep your Pokemon from being trapped. Also, don't be afraid to switch on any given turn if you can, as it could put you in a more favorable position for the following turn. If you can't work around the Shadow Tag, you could try to play around the Perish Song, with a well-placed Taunt or the ability Soundproof. If none of those are an option, your general plan should be to just hit hard and try to score some KOs. Some unexpected Choice Scarf users could easily catch your opponent off guard for a surprise KO. Just make sure that if you do play offensively, that you play around the Encores and Disables when necessary. If none of these are an option for your team, you will probably struggle against most Perish Trap teams. The good news is that it doesn't take much in terms of adjustments to counter a Perish Trap team. The most predictable part of a Perish Trap team is their Protects, and if you can take advantage of that with a well-timed Feint or Roar, you will be in good shape. Finally, the most important part about playing against the Perish Trap team is recognizing them in Team Preview, and planning the battle accordingly by knowing how it is likely to play out. Thanks for watching, and I hope this video has been helpful to you in some way. Since this is my first video, any feedback is much appreciated and will help me for making future videos. This was VGC Strategy, and see you next time.